Adana was just a young girl when everything she knew began to unravel. After the mysterious disappearance of her parents, she was taken in by her mother's sister and her husband, who lived in a quiet, lesser-known village on the edge of the river plains. At first, they pretended to care for her, feeding her and letting her sleep near the fireplace. But as the years passed, their true nature emerged. They began to treat her not as family, but as a servant. No, less than a servant. She was made to wake before dawn, scrub the floors, cook food she wouldn't get to eat, and fetch water from the river no matter the weather. While her cousin Amale wore fine fabrics and played with dolls carved from ivory, Adana wore patched rags and walked barefoot, even in the cold. Her aunt made sure the neighbours believed Adana was just a poor niece staying with them out of charity. But the truth was, she endured daily cruelty behind closed doors. She wasn't allowed to go to school. When Amali would boast about what she learned each day, Adana would quietly draw shapes in the mud outside, trying to imitate the letters and pictures from her cousin's school books. It was her secret joy, drawing. She used ash, charcoal and mud to sketch anything she saw: birds, huts, trees, even faces. One evening, food went missing from the house. Her uncle, a greedy man with a short temper, accused Adana without proof. No one listened when she cried that she hadn't touched it. Her aunt, eager to rid herself of the burden, whispered something to her husband in the kitchen. Later that night, Adana was dragged from her straw mat while she was asleep and told they were taking her somewhere special. She was terrified, but stayed silent. They reached the riverbank, where a broken canoe floated weakly by the edge. Her uncle forced her in, tying her hands loosely with a vine. "Let the river decide your fate," he said with a twisted smile. Then he shoved the canoe into the current. Adana screamed once, but the river swallowed the sound. The moonlit sky watched as the girl drifted farther into the dark waters, her hair soaked, heart pounding, praying someone, anyone, would save her. But on the shore, not a single villager moved, except one. Adana had learned early on that silence was safer than questions. After her parents vanished without a trace, she was taken into her aunt's home, if you could call it that. Her aunt Malika wore bright wrappers and loud jewellery, but her heart was stone. Her uncle, Taban, barely spoke except to shout commands. Their daughter, Amala, was the golden child. She had beaded slippers, books, and a room of her own. Adana slept on a mat near the fireplace, curled like a stray dog. She washed their clothes. She carried buckets of water even when her small arms trembled. She cooked the meals and stood to the side while others ate. Sometimes Amale would throw bones at her feet and laugh, calling it a royal offering to the dog. Adana never replied. Her only rebellion was her art. With bits of charcoal, ash, or river mud, she sketched pictures on the walls outside the hut when no one was looking. She drew the world as she imagined it could be: women dancing, birds flying, a mother holding her child. Her aunt would scrub the walls and whip her if she found the drawings. "Only idle fools waste time with dreams," she'd say. But Adana couldn't stop. Art was the only place she felt real. Then came the night of the missing bread. A loaf had vanished from the storage basket. Amali claimed she saw Adana near it. Adana tried to deny it, but her voice was drowned in her uncle's fury. He struck her hard across the face, sending her to the floor. "You eat what you do not earn," he shouted. "You steal and shame this house." Malika stepped in, her voice cold and calculated. "Enough. This girl brings us nothing but bad luck. The ancestors are angry. It's time we return her to the river." That night, while Amale pretended to sleep, Adana was dragged from her mat. The village was quiet. Taban carried her to the riverbank, where an old broken canoe lay half submerged. The wood was split, the rope brittle, but it would serve their purpose. He tied her hands loosely with vine rope, enough to make escape difficult, not impossible. "Let the river decide if you're worth saving," he muttered. Adana begged, pleaded, cried. No one came. The neighbours heard her cries, but turned away, their silence already bought with Malika's silver coins and Taban's threats. Even the village elder, a man who had once held her as a baby, looked away. Amale stood nearby, arms folded, her face blank. No pity, no remorse, just indifference. She watched as her cousin was pushed into the water like a sack of garbage. The canoe drifted into the current, spinning slightly as the river pulled her away. Adana didn't scream anymore. She just looked up at the stars and wondered if her mother could see her. And the river took her. Prince Luyando had grown up surrounded by silk, gold, and the constant echo of royal titles. But his mother, the Queen of Zambia, often reminded him, "A crown means nothing if you've never earned the dust on your feet." So at the age of 21, he was sent on a quiet journey. No guards, no fanfare, no royal carriages. Just himself, a simple tunic, and a promise to live among the people. His destination was a humble farming village near the great river, a place where no one knew his name. He was taken in by a generous farmer named Babatino, who treated him like a distant nephew. Luyando helped with planting, herding goats, and fetching water from the very river that cut through the kingdom like a silver ribbon. He was learning what it meant to sweat, to serve, to live without being bowed to. The work was hard, but the prince felt alive in a way he never had in the palace. On the third week of his stay, a storm brewed suddenly over the horizon. The skies turned charcoal grey, thunder cracked like drums, and the river began to churn violently. Babatino urged everyone indoors. But as Luyando reached the edge of the farmer's hut, he spotted something in the distance, movement on the river. Through sheets of rain, he saw a broken canoe spinning wildly in the current. A figure was inside, slumped and barely visible. Then, a flash of lightning illuminated the face of a girl, hair plastered to her cheeks, eyes half closed, hands tied. Luyando didn't think. He dropped his water jug and ran. He ripped off his overshirt and dove into the muddy river, cutting through waves that slammed against him like fists. The current was fierce, but the royal training in swimming and survival paid off. Stroke by stroke, he reached the canoe just as it tipped sideways. The girl slipped under. For one terrifying second, Luyando thought he'd lost her, but he dove deep, grasping in the dark water until his fingers found her arm. He surfaced, gasping, hauling her with him as he fought the tide. By the time he reached the riverbank, the rain had eased slightly. Villagers, drawn by the noise, came running. He laid the girl on the ground. She wasn't breathing at first. One of the older women knelt beside her and pressed a fist to her chest, chanting a prayer. Water gurgled from her mouth. She coughed, then gasped for air. Luyando's arms trembled from exhaustion. The villagers crowded around the girl, wrapping her in cloth, murmuring blessings and questions. Babatino arrived and put a hand on Luyando's shoulder. "You saved her," he said. "That was the bravest thing I've ever seen." But the prince only nodded, dazed. He looked down at the girl's face, pale, bruised, unfamiliar. There was something haunting about her, something that tugged at him, but he couldn't explain it. She didn't wake. She didn't speak. He stood and backed away, letting the others take over. "She's in good hands now," Babatino said, urging him home. The next morning, Luyando resumed his duties as a farm helper. He never asked for the girl's name. He never saw her again. Not yet. The first thing she felt was warmth, not from sunlight, but from a fire beside her cheek. The smell of herbs, smoke, and something sweet filled her nose. When she opened her eyes, she was inside a small hut with reed mats on the walls, beads hanging from the door. and a wrinkled woman stirring a pot nearby. She tried to sit up, but her body ached. The woman rushed over and gently eased her back down. "You're safe now," she said softly. "My name is Mama Chipo. You're lucky the river gave you back." The girl blinked. Her lips moved, but no words came. "Do you remember your name, child?" She shook her head. "Your home?" Another shake. A tear slipped down her cheek without warning. Mama Chipo studied her face and placed a hand over the girl's heart. "Then I shall call you Nia. It means purpose. And if the river brought you to me, you must still have yours." For days, Nia stayed in bed, healing slowly. Mama Chipo fed her soups and bitter teas. The villagers visited now and then, curious about the girl who'd survived the river storm. She always smiled politely but said little. She didn't remember anything before waking up in the hut, not her name, her family, or even her own voice. But when her hands were finally strong again, something remarkable happened. She picked up a piece of clay to shape into a bowl and instead molded it into a crown. Another time, she dipped her fingers into a pot of black river mud and drew on the floor. First a tree, then water, then a figure diving. The images poured from her like breath. She didn't know why she drew them, only that she had to. Mama Chipo watched in silence and later said, "You don't need memory to find your soul. Your hands remember what your mind cannot." Soon, Nia became Mama Chipo's helper. She ground herbs, shaped healing clay, swept the floors, and began painting on bark and pottery with colored soil. People began visiting just to see her work. Strange, beautiful scenes of distant mountains, glowing eyes, and a man with a half-hidden face standing beneath a crown of fireflies. She began to dream too. Vivid, unsettling dreams of water swallowing her, of a masked figure pulling her from the dark, and of voices calling her a name she couldn't quite hear. Sometimes she saw flashes of gold cloth and a woman humming a lullaby. Other nights, she dreamt of fire, betrayal, and falling. The villagers whispered about her. "She paints what hasn't happened yet," they said. "She draws dreams like she's lived them. Maybe she's touched by the river spirits." Her fame began to spread beyond the village. One merchant carried a pot she painted to the capital and sold it for 3 times the normal price. It bore the image of a young girl walking barefoot through fire, unharmed. And somewhere in the royal court, a prince heard whispers of a nameless girl who painted dreams in a village by the river. He didn't know why, but something about it pulled at him, as though he was part of a dream he'd forgotten. The kingdom of Zambia pulsed with excitement. The annual festival of fire was approaching, a grand celebration marking the end of the harvest season and the beginning of new blessings. Across the villages and cities, fires would be lit. Drums would echo through the valleys, and people from all corners of the land would gather in the capital to rejoice in a ritual of renewal. This year, the festival was particularly special. A rare lunar alignment would grace the sky, symbolizing a once-in-a-generation cycle of transformation. The royal family had announced that artisans and performers from all over the kingdom were welcome to present their crafts, music, and stories during the festival's 3-day celebration. Mama Chipo was bustling with excitement, preparing oils and soaps to sell in the marketplace. She turned to Nia and said, "Your hands carry the fire of memory, child. Show the world what they whisper to you." Nia hesitated. Though her art had brought her a growing circle of admirers, she still felt like a shadow without a name. But Mama Chipo's voice was steady. "What you carry is not just paint, Nia. It's truth wrapped in color." Reluctantly, Nia prepared her work: small wooden panels, bark scrolls, and ceramic bowls, each adorned with powerful images: a faceless woman staring into the stars, a golden crown floating on water, a masked man pulling someone from a wave. She didn't know why she painted these things, but every stroke felt familiar, as though her hands were echoing a life she couldn't remember. On the day of the festival, the capital glittered. Banners rippled through the air. Music filled the streets. Crowds flooded the royal square where dozens of village stalls lined the open space. Mama Chipo and Nia set up their modest booth near the edge, beside other herbalists and potters. Nia's artwork caught attention quickly. People paused, stared, and murmured about the haunting beauty in the girl's expressions. Word of the girl who paints dreams began to spread again, and it reached the ears of Prince Luyando. He had been standing near a poet's recital when one of his guards whispered, "Sire, there's a village artist causing a stir, the one from the river region." Luyando turned curiously and made his way through the crowd. When he reached the stall, his heart skipped. A girl was arranging painted bowls and scrolls with careful hands. Her face, there was something about it. She looked up briefly, and their eyes met. Something ancient sparked in his chest. He felt as if he knew her, not from the palace, not from court, but from somewhere raw and desperate, somewhere wet and wild, like the storm he'd never forgotten. He took a few steps closer, then paused, puzzled. She seemed startled too, though she didn't speak. Instead, she looked down quickly and handed a scroll to a waiting customer. Before he could speak to her, a voice called out behind him. "Prince Luyando." He turned. It was Amale, elegant in gold and green, flanked by courtiers. She beamed as she approached, bowing deeply. Her father had brokered her engagement to one of the royal cousins, and she was eager to secure her place. But when her eyes landed on Naya, her entire expression cracked. Adana. She blinked, unsure if her eyes betrayed her. But it was her, older, dressed plainly, yet unmistakably the same cousin she had watched float away in a broken canoe. Amale's heart pounded. If Adana remembered who she was, everything would fall apart. Her family's lie, her status, her engagement, everything. She clenched her jaw and quickly regained her composure. "Excuse me, Your Highness," she whispered to Luyando. "That girl, there's something off about her. I've heard rumors she practices strange magic." Luyando frowned slightly, but said nothing. Still, the seed of suspicion had been planted, and behind her poised smile, Amale's mind was already racing. Adana had returned. She needed to disappear. Again. Permanently. Nia couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted inside her since the festival. The moment she'd locked eyes with the prince, something deep and ancient stirred within her. That night, her dreams grew more vivid. Fragments of a woman humming by firelight, a man in regal robes whispering prayers, and her own hands clutching a pendant as a wave crashed overhead. One morning, while tidying Mama Chipo's storehouse, she discovered a damp, cloth-wrapped bundle tucked in the corner of an old chest. It smelled faintly of river water and earth. Curious, she unwrapped it. Inside was a delicate chain bearing a pendant she had never seen, yet her hands trembled as if they had held it 1,000 times. The charm was circular, etched with strange, flowing symbols, and a small crest shaped like a flame rising from a crown. The moment she touched it, something clicked in her memory. A voice echoed in her mind. Soft, warm, familiar. "Adana, if you're ever lost, this will guide you back to who you are." Her knees buckled, and she sat heavily on the floor, clutching the pendant to her chest as tears welled in her eyes. The name Adana echoed like a bell in her mind. That was her name. That was her. She staggered outside, drawn toward the river like a thread was pulling her. When she reached the riverbank, the world seemed to fall away. Her fingers moved on their own, gathering a pointed stone. She began to carve symbols into the large boulders by the water's edge, patterns that she didn't understand but somehow knew. Swirls, Flames, eyes, a tree with roots stretching into waves. Unseen by her, across the kingdom in the royal palace, the Queen Mother jolted awake from a vision-filled sleep. Her dream had been unlike any other. Waters rising, a child floating away, then returning wrapped in light and crowned with fire. A voice had whispered, "The flame that was hidden now burns again." She summoned the royal seer immediately. "Find the painter girl they speak of in the lower valley. There is a river child among them. I believe she carries the blood of the house of Amari." Back at the river, Adana, held the pendant tightly. She looked into the current and whispered, "Who were my parents? Who left me?" Mama Chipo arrived moments later, breathless, having followed Adana's trail. When she saw the carvings on the rocks and the pendant in her hand, her eyes widened. "I know that seal," she said softly. "I once served in the inner palace. That crest belonged to House Amari, the bloodline of warriors, scholars, and seers. They vanished during the uprising. Or so we thought." Adana turned to her, stunned. "Do you mean I'm royal?" Mama Chipo nodded slowly. "You are more than what was done to you, child. You are legacy, and the world has not forgotten." In her small hut, Mama Chipo unrolled an old tapestry and compared the pendant's design. The match was perfect. And far away, Prince Luyando sat in the palace gardens, staring at a painting he'd secretly bought from the festival. A girl standing alone in the river, wrapped in moonlight, her eyes burning with sorrow and strength. Something inside him whispered, "You know her. You were always meant to." Amali's calm was cracking. The girl she had once watched drift into a deadly current was now alive, painting visions that touched royalty and whispering truths no one had dared speak. If Adana remembered who she was, if anyone found out, Amali's future would crumble like dust. She couldn't let that happen, so she sought out help in the shadows. In a forest beyond the royal gates, hidden beneath twisted trees and bones hanging from vines, lived a rogue priestess named Nyoka. She was known for her poison-tipped blessings and for twisting fate in exchange for gold. Amale met her under the cover of night. "I need her erased," Amale whispered. "Not by blade, by fear." Nyoka grinned. "Then fear shall follow her like her own shadow." The next morning, whispers began in the capital markets. "That girl from the river. Ever since she came, children fall sick. My cousin bought her painting. Now his crops have died. They say her art curses what it shows." Before long, the whispers reached Nia's village. At the market, a man accused her of stealing fruit. A woman screamed that her presence made the goats miscarry. Nia tried to defend herself, but the crowd turned hostile. Rough hands grabbed her arms. Someone called for the village guards. Mama Chipo shouted, but her voice was drowned. Then, just as the guards reached for her, a firm voice cut through the noise. "Let her go." Prince Luyando stepped forward from the crowd, dressed simply, but with eyes that carried authority. The guards hesitated. He showed a signet ring under his sleeve, the royal seal. "She is under a royal observation. Any harm that comes to her will be considered treason." The crowd backed away, murmuring. Luyando took Nia aside. "These people are afraid of what they do not understand. Are you all right?" She nodded weakly, clutching the pendant beneath her dress. "Why are they turning against you?" he asked. "What is it they fear?" "I don't know," she whispered. "Sometimes I don't even understand myself." That night, under the light of a flickering lantern, he walked the path back to Mama Chipo's hut. Curious and unsettled, he asked to see Nia's artwork again. She hesitated, then quietly handed him a scroll. When he unrolled it, his breath caught. It was him. His face, half covered in rain, diving into a stormy river. The exact moment he'd saved the girl. But it wasn't just a memory. There was something else in the painting, a faint glow around the girl, as if she was something more than human. Luyando stared at her. "How do you know about this?" Nia's eyes brimmed with tears. "I don't know. These visions just come. I dream them. I feel them. I see places I've never been, faces I don't know. But I do know them. And this painting, this one, I see it every time I close my eyes." He gently took her hands. "I saved a girl from the river once. She looked like you." Her lips trembled. "I think I was that girl." They stood in silence, two halves of a story finally touching again, yet the truth was still veiled. He knew she was someone from his past, but he still didn't know who, and neither did she. The weight of the pendant never left Naya's neck, or her heart. It was as if the small piece of metal had awakened a voice inside her, one that grew louder each day. After the confrontation in the market and the prince's unexpected defense, she returned to Mama Chipo's hut, quiet but restless. That night, she sat by the fire, staring into the flames. Mama Chipo watched her for a long time, then finally spoke. "There's something I must tell you, child. I've waited too long." Nia looked up. "I knew your mother," Mama Chipo said softly, "and your father. I was a servant in the royal palace of the Amari line, long before the house was betrayed." Nia's breath caught. "They were good people," Mama Chipo continued. "Your father was a chief with a scholar's mind, and your mother, she had a gift with plants, with people, with spirits. They ruled not with fists, but with wisdom. But jealousy lives in every kingdom." She paused. "Your Aunt Malika and Uncle Taban, they were not always cruel, but greed poisoned them. Your father refused to let them control the land meant for your inheritance. So they plotted. On the night of a storm, they drugged the guards, set fire to the records, and vanished your parents under the cover of smoke. You were just a child." Nia's eyes filled with tears. "Then why didn't anyone come for me? They claimed you had died with them, but I never believed it. I left the palace in mourning and wandered until I found a new home. The river brought you back to me, Adana." Nia touched the pendant. It pulsed warmly, like a heartbeat. "That crest," Mama Chipo pointed, "was the Amari family seal. And your mother whispered it to you for a reason, to guide you home when the time was right." As the fire crackled beside them, everything inside Nia fell into place. She was Adana Amari, not just a lost girl, not just a painter. She was the heir to an ancestral chiefdom, and the blood of royalty still ran through her. The next morning, Luyando arrived in plain clothes. She met him outside with the pendant in one hand and her painting in the other. "I know who I am now," she said. He looked at her, then down at the painting, the moment he had saved her, and whispered, "Adana." Guilt flickered in his eyes. "I should have known. I felt it, from the start. I knew your spirit before I knew your name." "You saw me," she said, "even when I didn't." They returned to the palace together. The Queen Mother welcomed them with quiet grace. When Adana showed the pendant, a royal historian was summoned. The seal was confirmed. There was no doubt. A public trial was called in the court square. Amala and her parents were summoned. The crowd gathered, hungry for truth. Adana stood tall before them all, no longer nameless, no longer afraid. "Amala," she said, her voice echoing, "you knew who I was when you saw me again, and you stayed silent." Amale broke. In front of the court, she confessed the truth. How they'd thrown Adana into the river. How they paid the villagers to keep quiet. how they faked the family's death to take the land. Gasps rippled through the crowd. The elders, appalled, stripped Amali's family of all titles and wealth. The land was restored to Adana's name. As the people chanted her name, Adana Amari, she looked up into the sky. The river had returned her to the shore, but her soul had brought her home. The drums beat low and slow, like the heartbeat of the land itself. Firelight danced across the walls of the royal courtyard, where elders, nobles and villagers alike had gathered. Garlands of river flowers hung from the gates. The Queen Mother stood tall beside Prince Luyando as the royal historian read aloud the restored lineage of the House of Amari. Adana stood at the centre in a gown of woven earth tones, bare feet grounded in the soil of her ancestors. Her hair was braided with silver beads, and around her neck hung the pendant, polished but unchanged. She looked radiant, not with jewels, but with truth. Today, the Queen Mother announced, we honour the return of the river's child, Adana Amari, rightful heir to the sacred lands of her forebears. May her voice echo where silence once reigned. Crowds cheered. Women ululated in joy. Children clapped their hands, their eyes wide with wonder. Yet when offered a chamber in the palace, Adana shook her head gently. I thank you, she said, but my journey was not meant to end in walls of gold. My heart belongs to the river, and to those who are still unheard. With the Queen Mother's blessing, Adana returned to the banks of the very river that had once threatened to take her life. On a peaceful stretch of land nearby, she built something new. Not a palace, but a sanctuary. The Riverlight Centre became a haven for orphaned girls, abandoned women, and artists who carried pain in their hands. Clay pots lined the walkways. Murals bloomed across stone walls. The scent of herbs drifted on the wind, and laughter replaced the silence that once lived there. Adana taught the girls to shape the earth, to draw from memory, and to speak truths through colour. She often said, the river doesn't just carry pain. Sometimes it brings you back home. Prince Luyando visited often. He walked the grounds in quiet awe, no longer the saviour of a nameless girl, but a man deeply moved by the woman she had become. They would sit beneath the old baobab tree and speak of dreams, justice, and how far grace could carry the broken. In the final weeks of the season, a new festival of fire approached, this time with Adana chosen to lead the ceremonial painting. Before the gathered crowd, she unveiled a towering mural painted on the riverside cliffs. It told her story in cascading layers. A broken canoe drifting through storm, a prince diving into darkness, a girl with no name moulding stars from mud, a crown not of metal, but of ash, pigment, and earth. The final image was her standing beneath the river moon, arms raised in light, surrounded by the faces of the girls she now taught. The crowd was silent, then erupted into applause. That night, as fireflies blinked in the grass and the air grew cool, Luyando approached her. He didn't come with guards or fanfare, just a quiet heart and open hands. You taught me that royalty isn't about crowns, he said. It's about rising, not just for yourself, but for others. He knelt before her and held out a simple ring made of braided river reeds and a small silver bead. I don't love you because you're Adana Amari, he said. I love you because you made yourself whole when the world tried to keep you broken. Will you walk beside me? Tears welled in her eyes, not of sorrow, but of fullness. Yes, she whispered, because I was already walking, and now you've caught up. As the festival fires crackled and the moon painted the river in silver, the people of Zambia sang her name. Adana, the girl who rose from water and built her crown from mud, memory, and mercy. Final line, voiceover or title card. He saved her from the river, not knowing she would one day teach the kingdom how to swim through sorrow and rise into purpose.